After a decade in existence, it took the presiding judge only 30 minutes to deliver the first verdict by the International Criminal Court. Is the ICC really a long-term project that's still in its early days? And can this verdict become a deterrent to other leaders who are accused of committing crimes against their own people? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, has found the Congolese warlord Thomas Lubanga guilty of recruiting and using child soldiers between 2002 and 2003. Thomas Lubanga was a rebel leader in eastern Congo during a 4-year conflict that ended in 2003. The International Criminal Court has ruled that he was guilty of personally encouraging children to join his army in Congo's Ituri region. It's the first verdict in the ICC's 10-year history.
The Chamber concludes that the prosecution has proved, beyond reasonable doubt, that Mr. Thomas Lubanga Dailo is guilty of the crimes of conscripting and enlisting children under the age of 15 years into the FPLC and using them to participate actively in hostilities.
Well, before we bring in today's panel of guests for our discussion, let's speak to Al Jazeera's Tim Friend, who's in The Hague. Tim, this verdict, a landmark moment for the ICC, its first verdict. Lubanga was taken into custody by the court in 2006. The trial began in 2009. Why on earth has it taken so long?
The sheer logistics of a case like this, and also the fact that it was their first to reach this conclusion. There's an air of quiet satisfaction here, I think, amongst court officials and the judges that they've achieved this. But you're quite right, it's taken a huge amount of time. But if you can imagine the task of collecting evidence, of investigating a case of this nature, presents huge difficulties. And there were moments during the trial when objections were made about the style of the investigation by the prosecution. The defence were concerned that it wasn't being adequately carried out, that they weren't being given all the information that they needed to mount an adequate defence. So I think, as you were saying, this court is still in its infancy, and what we saw in this case was very much a feeling of the way, almost, towards a conclusion. It's now reached it, and a verdict has been given, and of course at a later date there will be sentencing. But as I say, for the moment the court, I think, is reasonably happy, but there's still a long way to go in this court's progress.
Tim, the proceedings will have been keenly watched, I'm sure, by potential defendants. How does a case come before the court?
Well, the court can start to pursue a case itself. It has that option. It can bring a situation to the attention. The prosecutor can bring a situation to the attention of the judges and say, this is a situation I think we should look at. It can also be directed by the Security Council to start to pursue potential defendants. And in its sights at the moment are Saif al-Islam, one of the sons of the late leader of Libya, Colonel Gaddafi, some of the Sudanese leadership over Darfur. So there are other cases in the pipeline. But as I was mentioning, the problems that need to be overcome are huge. And there has been this criticism that, for the moment at least, the focus has been on parts of Africa. But it's a court of last resort. It happens only if the countries themselves can't or are unwilling to pursue a case. And part of its difficulty is because its brief is so wide-ranging, unlike tribunals over former Yugoslavia or Rwanda, it doesn't have that sharp focus. And I think this is where the criticism has come in about who it chooses to go after.
Tim, many thanks indeed. Tim Friend in The Hague. Well, the International Criminal Court has several trials and warrants underway, all of them, as Tim was saying, focusing on crimes or alleged crimes in Africa. Among the Africans on trial or under warrant are the Congolese rebel leader Jean-Pierre Bemba. He's accused of leading fighters in a campaign of torture, rape and murder in the Central African Republic. Former Ivory Coast President Laurent Gbagbo is charged with criminal responsibility for acts during the post-election standoff in 2010. And Kenyan presidential hopeful Uhuru Kenyatta will stand trial for directing post-election violence in 2009, which killed more than 1,000 people. And the Sudanese President Omar Hassan al-Bashir, the ICC approved a warrant for his arrest, charging him with murder, extermination, forcible transfer, torture and rape in 2009 and genocide in 2010. All four deny all the accusations against them. Also wanted, as Tim was saying, by the ICC is Saif al-Islam Gaddafi. The International Court issued a warrant for his arrest in June, but Libyan authorities are insisting that he be tried on Libyan soil. He's also charged with crimes against humanity. So, will this verdict serve as a deterrent to other leaders who are committing crimes against their own people? To help us answer this question, we're joined by our guests today. From Paris, Florence Hartmann, former spokesperson and advisor of the UN International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. From London, we're joined by William Schabas, Professor of International Law and Senior Lecturer at Middlesex University. And from New York, William Pace, convener of the Coalition for the International Criminal Court. Welcome to you all. William Schabas, put this into perspective for us. What's the significance of this verdict, and will it make the ICC an effective deterrent, do you think?
The great significance of it is that it shows the International Criminal Court working properly and able to deliver a judgment in a difficult case. So this is, to the extent that an International Criminal Tribunal is a deterrent, then this is doing it. And I think that, I personally believe that it is. I think that the deterrent effect of the court actually began even before the judgment, just the threat of prosecution. But the fact that the court is showing that the wheels of justice are actually turning properly and that the grease is working and that verdicts can be delivered is going to amplify that deterrent effect.
William Pace in New York, do you share that view? The ICC isn't a perfect body by any means, but it is beginning to work.
Well, I think the International Criminal Court will be seen now as one of the most important advances in international law, in international criminal law, in international humanitarian law dealing with war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide in all of history. And we have seen, even in these last 5 years, governments and armies that did participate in the conscription of child soldiers to begin to stop. We've seen rebel leaders who have indicated that they're stopping this type of practice, revolutionary leaders. The ICC, I think, because it's an independent court, it's not a Security Council controlled court, it's not a military tribunal like the post-World War II courts, I think it will have the deterrent impact as law has, justice and law have at every level to try and prevent serious crimes.
Florence Hartmann, it's taken 10 years to get to this verdict. Does today's verdict act as a turning point for the ICC?
It is not a turning point, but it's this first verdict is an example that the court can work and it will try to fight impunity. In that sense, it can be a deterrent in the future, but it's a very long-term goal. For the moment, I'm not sure. I mean, there was this case against Lubanga was some kind of pure campaign against the recruitment of child soldiers. But as we know, he could have been indicted also or investigated and then indicted for other crimes. So if some commanders are thinking about the risks they are taking by enrolling children under 15, other commanders have not stopped stopped raping massively in Congo or in other places. So the deterrent impact is very limited for the moment. And as long that we have only a very small sample of people indicted, that we have one leader for child soldiers indicted, and we don't know how many years imprisonment he will be convicted to, it is not sure that people will think that it's not worth taking the risk to continue those crimes due to the fact that there is a very small risk to be brought to justice and convicted.
Florence, is the ICC a body with a long-term future?
Well, it is a permanent court, and contrary to the International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia of Rwanda, it has the goal to continue and to build a system which should be a real deterrent, with the assurance that we will have those who have committed crimes brought to the International Court or brought to national court and convicted for the crimes they have committed. It's a long term. But for the ICC to survive, it has to be convincing, not only to the public opinion or on TV today because of one conviction in 10 years, but for the impact on the victims also, the impact in the field. And also by getting more independent from politics. Because if you have the feeling that you can negotiate or that you can postpone your arrest, before coming to court and facing the charges for which you have been indicted, so the deterrent impact will be reduced. It must be the ICC must show clearly that there is no way to escape a conviction if you have committed crimes, whether at the International Court, okay, whether by the existence of the ICTY that you will be brought before National Court. But that's not the case for the moment.
Okay, we'll pause for a moment. I just want to tell you something of the International Criminal Court's mandate. The court itself was established in 1998. It formally entered into force in July 2002. As we were saying, it's taken 10 years to get to this verdict. The court's financed by its 120 member states. Germany in particular is pushing at the moment to freeze the ICC's budget. The US, Russia and China, all permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, remain outside the jurisdiction of the court. However, the ICC is a treaty-based court. It only has jurisdiction over those states which sign and ratify the Rome Statute. The ICC will hear cases referred to it by the UN Security Council, as in the case of Sudan, which doesn't require the consent of the state party concerned, by a state party referral or proprio motu, which means the prosecutor's own volition. The ICC has been accused of becoming increasingly political and susceptible to pressure, the pressure coming from major powers like the US, China and Russia. Let's go back to our guests then. William Schabas, I mean, we were talking about it being an imperfect body a little earlier. William, the US, China, Russia, India, all non-signatories. What's the significance of that for the court?
Well, we'd like them to be involved in the court. We'd like them to be directly involved. I think that to some extent they're not hostile to the court. That's the first. I think that's an observation that's important. Last year, when the United Nations Security Council basically gave the court jurisdiction over the situation in Libya at the time of Gaddafi's outrages, there was a unanimous Security Council resolution. So that means that Russia and China, India was a member of the Security Council at the time, and the United States all voted in favor. So they're supportive of the court in some context. Obviously, they're not supporting the court when they feel that it threatens their particular national interests. But that's quite predictable, and nobody's surprised at that. The United States has been particularly supportive of the court in recent years, above all since the beginning of the Obama administration. You know, I want to take issue, I think, with what Florence Hartmann was saying. I think she takes too negative an approach to the deterrent role of justice in the court. I don't think that the way you look at the deterrent impact of criminal justice is by looking at the people who aren't deterred. We have that in our national justice systems. We don't turn around and throw our criminal justice system out the window because somebody commits a murder and we say, well, they're not deterred. There are always going to be some people who aren't deterred by criminal justice. But what we're looking for is evidence that this is changing the conduct of combatants in particular and those who would violate human rights. And I think that there's a lot of evidence of that. We also should be aware that the International Criminal Court is part of a much bigger system. The bigger system includes not only the international tribunals for Yugoslavia, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, and so on, but a growing number of national jurisdictions that are dealing with these crimes in a more systematic and a more rigorous manner. So the net is closing in. 25 years ago, tyrants would commit atrocities and people would say, there'll be no justice. There was nowhere to deliver justice to them. And now there's a whole net of institutions and of possibilities that's doing that. And it is deterring people.
All right. Florence, do you want to respond to what you've just heard?
Well, I fully agree. It is a goal, but I'm just saying that it is for the moment too selective to be as deterrent as it could already at this stage, because I agree that we have something which is a great improvement and since the beginning of the 90s, but we could have done much better with what we have, and we have to do it. And it is too selective by the charges, by the number of indictees, by the countries which are investigated, and by the number of states which have signed the Rome Statute, for instance.
All right. William Pace in New York, how damaging is it to the court that the likes of the most powerful country in the world, the US, is not party to it? And I don't know whether you want to take up this issue of the court's relationship with the United Nations Security Council. Is it healthy that countries that are not signatories, like the US, can refer other countries to the ICC?
Well, I want to build on what Professor Schabas said. This is a new court, an independent international criminal court that builds on now first the post-World War II military tribunals, and then the Security Council tribunals, the ad hocs and the hybrid tribunals created after the Yugoslav genocides and war crimes and the Rwanda genocide in Sierra Leone and Cambodia, Timor, etc. So we have now almost 20 years of an extraordinary development of international justice. Sitting on top of it is this new independent international criminal court, not controlled by a political body, and whose jurisdiction recognizes no immunities, no reservations. It is going to take years to get it to work right, but just understand that even a few years ago, the general view was that without the major powers participating, you couldn't even create an effective international organization. So now the small and middle power democracies, 120 governments now, have created a new independent court, and it's a new system of international criminal justice, because what's also happening with national laws in Germany, in Spain, in Belgium, in Argentina, Mexico, in African countries. Now, people who have arrested can't travel to, say, the South African inauguration of Zuma, because South Africa said to President Bashir, you can come, but we'll have to arrest you. So we're seeing, I think, a revolutionary change in trying to surround war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Okay. And I think this will eventually, the big powers, the Indias, Russia, China, the United States, will all, I think, have to opt to come into the system, but they won't be able to come in on the basis of exceptionalism, but on the basis of equalness with all of the other states.
Professor Schabas, I just want to pick up on something that William Pace was saying there. What happens if an alleged war criminal from one country, not party to the ICC, that has been indicted, leaves that country and sets foot in a foreign land that is party to the ICC? Do the authorities there have an obligation to arrest them and pass them to the court?
It depends, where the crime was committed. I mean, if we take the situation in Syria right now, Syria hasn't joined the court, so Syria is pretty much off limits for the International Criminal Court. Theoretically, the court could prosecute a citizen of a country that's joined the court, like a British citizen or a Canadian citizen or a French citizen, if they'd committed an atrocity in Syria. But we're really concerned about Syrians committing crimes in Syria. And so they don't have jurisdiction, and even if the president of Syria were to go to another country that had joined the court, there'd be nothing to charge them with within the framework of the court's jurisdiction. Of course, many states can now prosecute people before their own justice systems without any reference to the International Criminal Court for atrocities that are committed in other countries. So, we're talking about a net, but it's a net that has some big holes in it, and people do get to swim through it. But it's a net that is getting more and more effective.
Okay, is that what's happening in the case of Saif al-Islam? Is that why he hasn't been transferred to the ICC?
No. Gaddafi's son has been charged by the court. There's an arrest warrant issued against him, and in principle he should be sent to The Hague to stand trial. The prosecutor has decided to let the Libyan justice system give it a go and to see if they can do a proper job of it. There is a principle that underpins the International Criminal Court, which is that we defer to the national courts. In other words, the presumption is that national courts should and can do the job, and it's only when they fail that the International Criminal Court steps in.
All right.
So the prosecutor has decided that he'll let Libya give it a try, but if they fail or if they falter, then the court moves right in and they take Gaddafi to The Hague.
Okay. William Pace, we're rapidly running out of time. A brief answer, if you can, please. I want to come back to this issue of the United Nations Security Council. You say that the ICC isn't a political body. Nonetheless, there is a certain hypocrisy involved, isn't there, that countries that aren't signatories can refer other countries to the ICC.
Yes, and I think this has been a real problem where the U.S., Russia, China, non-state parties, India, who've then would never allow, with their veto powers, the Council to refer matters that affected them, but they are referring other non-state party matters, such as Sudan and Libya, and this is a problem that affects the legitimacy. But I think over time, the same state parties, the 120, are also in the United Nations, and I think we will see pressure being put into the Security Council to change its working methods and to insist that the veto is not used when the Council is dealing with war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. That will be a major day of advance in maintaining international peace and security.
Florence Hartmann, what do you think needs to be done to make the court more effective in the way that it functions, and also in reducing the role that politics plays in international justice?
Well, the independence of international justice is a very, very long fight also. It's a situation in which the ICTY and the ICTR were faced with. They had to fight with it. The ICC has a different relation in that sense that there is the authority for the Security Council to take decision and to order an investigation, which was not the case with the ICTY. So maybe that's not something which may be a big problem if it's an official and open order from the politics to the court. But for the rest, they have to fight for their independence. And you know that many directives or suggestions, as you want, are provided to the prosecutor during the investigation to insist on that or on that, and everyone is giving its opinion, and that's very, very bad. There is also the necessity for politics not to encourage the court to limit investigations. For instance, the issue we have with Côte d'Ivoire.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Florence, to interrupt you, but we are out of time for this edition of Inside Story. Many thanks indeed to our guests today in Paris, Florence Hartmann, in London, William Schabas, and in New York, William Pace. And thank you very much indeed for being with us on this edition of Inside Story. As always, if you want to send us your feedback, just email us your thoughts. We're at insidestory@aljazeera.net. In Doha, I'm Adrian Finnegan. Thanks for watching. See you again. Bye for now.